Hi everyone, and welcome to our presentation based on our development of a learning strategy that implements the universal design for learning principle of perceptible information. Please follow the link under the title to see the website we built to teach our concept using this principle. Let's show you how we did it. We chose the UDL principle of perceptible information, which was defined by Professor Haven as instruction is designed so that necessary information is communicated effectively to the student regardless of ambient conditions or the student's sensory abilities. We chose the principle because we believe that it is a fundamental but often overlooked aspect of instructional design. By making all instructional materials perceptible by all students, instructors can drastically cut down on the amount of one-off and alienating assistive tools like having an interpreter in the room. This helps to integrate all students as part of the same student body with no one singled out for having different abilities than their peers.
We chose to create a website that teaches a simple lesson for learning how to annotate and understand a poem. Both the lesson and its resources, as well as the website design, are guided by the perceptible information principle. The site's homepage, as shown here, explains the purpose of the website and guides the learner to 3 pages of the site: accessing the poem, annotation instructions, and tools.
Our target audience was primarily undergraduate students who might undertake this lesson as part of an early composition course. However, we also saw the possibility that other adults might enjoy this lesson as a way to get started reading and enjoying poetry. So, we assumed that the demographics were generally those of students in undergraduate composition courses, but that doesn't narrow it down much. The fact that our students would have a variety of different abilities was something we counted on from the beginning, and the reason why we made every aspect of our design perceptible in multiple ways. We also assumed that our students would have had limited exposure to poetry, especially as an academic interest, and no exposure to annotation or how to do it. We proceeded as though students had never annotated a poem before. That said, we did not start with theory or why annotation was important. We simply stated that annotation was a way to understand poetry and then got straight to it. Hopefully, this more hands-on approach would appeal to students regardless of whether they annotated a poem before or not. We didn't waste students' time by going over simple concepts, but neither did we overwhelm students by using jargon or complex processes.
Guided by the principle of perceptible information, we crafted the site to maximize accessibility within the confines of the Google Sites platform. The headings, links, and text are compatible with the use of screen readers. We selected Verdana font, a sans serif font, with minimum font size of 14 point to maximize readability. The colors of backgrounds and fonts and of the graphics chosen are all high color contrast, well above the minimum 4.5:1 ratio, and the graphics each have alt text descriptions. The use of graphics was limited to avoid extraneous mental load, particularly in light of having to include many hyperlinks. The website was broken up into different pages based on the content. This allows users to more efficiently navigate the site and avoid excessive scrolling and skimming. Additionally, our hyperlinks include brief descriptions of the content to which they're linked to inform learners and help them more effectively locate resources that meet their needs.
Traditionally, text-based materials are some of the most difficult to manipulate into working for this principle. Text is often a challenge for people with vision impairments, dyslexia, migraines, and many other conditions. Classrooms of the past were often so entirely text-based as to be completely inaccessible to some members of these groups. So, we designed a lesson that could be perceived by all, or at least by many. We did this first by making the lecture content available as text, audio, and video with captions. This allows students to learn from the type of media that appeals to them while still providing them with the same content as their peers. The provided text was editable for adjusting font or size, and we also converted the text-based content into files that were readable by refreshable braille displays and screen readers, so that students with low vision could use the text-based display if that appealed to them more than the audio version. The actual instructions involve reading the poem through 3 times. Each time, the learner answers different questions or performs different tasks to interact with the content of the poem. Finally, they scan over the notes from their first 3 readings and use them to synthesize the meaning of the poem as a whole. They are given the option then to explore further by answering additional question prompts at the end of the lecture. On our site, we dedicated an entire page to annotation tools, their links, and a brief description of their pros and cons to allow students to use the tool that works best for them. This included accessibility feature-rich Microsoft Word, of course, but also included more annotation-specific tools like Zotero. Thus, students could use the material any way they wished, learn any way they wished, and practice any way they wished, because there were enough choices to make one version or another perceptible to each and every student. Our learning objective is tied to the idea that students would be taking this lesson as part of a college composition course. Therefore, being able to state the main idea of a poem was a goal in and of itself. However, because we wanted students to remember this information and to be able to use it in practice after the class was over, we also kept in mind the performance objective, which was, more formally stated, basically the idea that we'd like our students to have the ability to read and enjoy poetry. Of course, these aren't strictly measurable goals, but poetry, like any art form, doesn't exactly lend itself to the quantifiable. Additionally, reading poetry for the purpose of understanding is so infrequently a professional skill that it seemed ludicrous to tie it to some specific professional development goal. Probably the only people who need to understand poetry for their jobs are poets, and then there's just people who enjoy poetry and people who publish and edit poetry, again, for their jobs. Those are all possible roles for our students to fill in their professional lives, but if they do so, they will receive much more extensive training in the subject in courses after composition. Therefore, we stuck with the basic goal of understanding and enjoying poetry after class was over. We did this by making all our materials perceptible so that no one was fighting against a barrier while also struggling to understand poetry. We also structured the lecture that students could watch, read, or listen to it while annotating their own poetry, so that the practice was built in from the beginning, but also so that the lecture served as a sort of job aid that students could return to even after the lesson was over. We also enabled our learning and performance objectives by giving students the opportunity to choose their own annotations tool and style, and thus they could create an environment for themselves where they learned best. The first of the technologies we used to create this learning was Census Access, because it allowed us to convert the text material of the lecture into an MP3, a refreshable braille display compatible version, and a screen reader compatible PDF. This, right off the bat, made the lecture perceptible to more students. Then we used Camtasia to record the lecture as a screen recording. We added text to the video beyond just the poem and the annotation to help students stay focused on the task at hand, but also to understand what were the most important parts of the lecture. Then we uploaded this to YouTube, which allowed me to use their captioning tool to type up my own captions while an algorithm did the hard part, the timing. This made the video accessible to students who are deaf or hard of hearing. Then this video was embedded in our Google site, which used a heading hierarchy structure and alt text to ensure it was perceptible to those using screen readers. Finally, we listed numerous annotation technologies with a quick explanation of what they were and how to use them. The variety hopefully allows students to choose what is most accessible to them.
Thanks to the availability of many useful options for technology, creating resources for our poetry lesson wasn't terribly challenging. One hurdle that we did run into was auditing the accessibility of our site. Finding free, user-friendly web accessibility scanners that didn't require an extensive input of personal information was a challenge. One of the most useful resources we found was the Web Accessibility Evaluation Tools list on the Web Accessibility Initiative website. The list allows you to filter results to find evaluation tools that match your desired criteria. Each tool listed has a brief description and additional collapsible text for more detailed information. When testing some accessibility scanning tools, the results of the audits varied. For example, one site listed our color contrast as well exceeding the 4.5 to 1 required minimum, while another scanner reported that our foreground and background colors did not have sufficient contrast. This variability, particularly for a user inexperienced with interpreting accessibility audit reports, made it difficult to verify the accuracy of some of the audit items. Overall, however, we feel that we used what Google Sites has to offer and crafted an accessible site driven by the principle of perceptible information.
Thanks for watching our presentation.